jako z těch 200 kg ten trup, který je absolutně dokonalý.
Tak jo, to bych přelámu.
Je to prototypický počítač, jako plnohodnotný. This one is
I can
show this.
Are you kidding? I mean, that is incredible.
We have to finish that, and we have to do the choreography because there are no the actual movements which I want to do, you know. The choreography is like half of the sculpture.
Yeah.
Because you know you can do like different funny things with it. It's incredible. I remember like being a kid, I get either train or like model of the train, something which was like electrical. And I was playing with that like 1 hour, and then I went to my grandfather's shop. I put it into wires. I screwed it into wires and beat it with a hammer because I wanted to know what is inside. I didn't care about, you know, playing with the train. I just needed to know what is inside and how is possible it actually runs. And I was like something like 2.5, 3 years old, like really like a kid. And they saw that I'm like, like insane, you know. I would say they were like asking psychiatrists if it's okay if I'm, you know, destroying a toys. And they did not understood that the only thing I wanted to know was what is inside. Like, you know, I was grown up in artist family. Both parents are artists. My father is painter, mother is restorator, like doing all the restorating all the Gothic stuff, and I was obviously, as the first kid, I was like sort of pushed to happen to be an artist. So the first 2 years of my life, I was, of course, following my parents for the openings and whatever, you know, culture actions. And as the kid, I began to hate it. So I was like drawing and doing some etches and stuff like that. I began to hate it, and I completely like swapped into like a different field. So my childhood was really doing like car races, flying, and I was like deeply in flying and making models of flying. So it was the second part of the family. So my grandfather from the mother side was actually also inventor and an officer in army, being kicked out, of course, after the invasion of the Russians. So I was like in between those. So as a kid, I was much more interested about, you know, the technical stuff. Meanwhile, being on a high school, I realized that I probably won't be sort of fulfilled and satisfied with, you know, constructing amplifiers. So I was thinking like, okay, let's try something more creative, and then I thought, okay, why not design? So I don't want to be an artist. I hate art. So I was doing like theater and some filming, stuff like that. And then I thought, okay, well, maybe I should think about some kind of like a more creative, part of life. So I tried industrial design department. So I attempt for industrial design on University of Applied Art, and I was accepted on third round though. So that was the beginning. So yes, I'm in a way I'm sort of like split. When I was like, I don't know, 11, 12, 11, I thought that I would go and be a fighter pilot. I sort of realized that I would have to be probably too much employed in the regime or whatever, helping the regime. So I thought, oh well, it's probably not the way I want to be. Well, you have to consider I was born in '67, which means that when I was like 2, 3, it was the moment when the biggest repressions caused by Russians' occupation in Czech Republic happened.
Cerny traces his impulse to revolt to a childhood under communism where freedom of expression was suppressed. When he was 4, a statue of Lenin was erected in a square near his house. One day, as he and his father were driving by, his father muttered that they would be better off building streetlights. Later, when David repeated this at kindergarten, his teacher called his parents to warn them about their young subversive. From 1988 to 1994, David Cerny studied at the Academy of Arts, Architecture, and Design in Prague. And while a student there, he first drew attention when in May 1991, at 22, he was arrested after painting a giant Soviet tank pink, transforming what was supposed to be a memorial to the liberation of Czechoslovakia by the Red Army in 1945 into the sculptural equivalent of a large pink toy. For Cerny, the tank had been a symbol of the Soviet-led occupation of Czechoslovakia in 1968 and a monument to decades of Russian oppression.
The war memorial, it was in the center of Prague. It was, or it's supposed to be the first tank which actually approached Prague and liberated Prague on the end of the war. But it was complete fake. It was lie from the first beginning because it was not the tank which actually went to the Prague. The first tank which went to the Prague by the Russian army was destroyed. So Stalin decided to send a new one, and it was like a completely different one. So he sent a new one which was never actually on the battlefield to be exhibited. And so it was probably a memorial of the war for 20 years, or 23 years. But after that, after the invasion, when the Russians invaded, same way as Ukraine, when they invaded Czech Republic in '68, for everybody it happened to be a symbol of the Russian suppression and dominancy and occupation and okay, with the tank I had those 5 minutes of fame back home. So the first layer of the pink kept on, or was there only for like 2 days, and it was repainted immediately by Czech army. And of course it was like a huge scandal, in that moment. It was like bizarre, funny situation. So I was like walking on the street, being approached by people who were asking me to sign petition to save me. I was like, okay, save David Cerny. Would you sign it? And I was like, oh, well, it's like a bit awkward, if I sign it. But do you think that it's like proper? And they were like, why? So yeah, well, that's because it's me, I was not actually jailed. No. I was persecuted. I think that I get the public law disturbance, and I was fined on the end. Then it was repainted on a green, and 2 weeks later, about 20 parliament members decided to help me, so they did the same thing as I did. Because they had like the parliamentary immunity. Police could not tell them anything. So they went there, and there were a lot of police around, of course. So it was like big demonstration in that one. I mean, there was probably in that time, there was a demonstration around that memorial every day. So there were like, a bunch of people who were pro-Russians and saying that it should be saved, and a zillion people, trying to, fight that it should be kept pink. Even it was already green, so then the parliament members came and they repainted pink, so it was like a bizarre situation. And of course, with all the protests from the Russian side. And it was also in the time when the Russian troops were actually moving away after, 22 years from the Czech Republic. So it was like, I probably enjoyed it for the first month, and then I began to hate it. So because I was like always introduced. This is the tank guy. It's like, well, I was like, fuck, it's just, Now it is in the military museum, in the front of the military museum, like official military museum of Czech Republic, and it is pink. It's like military pink, actually. They call it. But it is now in like real, proper military painted pink color.
In 1996, David Cerny created Man Hanging Out, which depicts psychoanalyst Sigmund Freud suspended by one hand from a pole high above the ground. Cerny created the piece in response to the question of what role the intellectual would play in the new millennium. Perhaps the message is a man's hopelessness in a modern world. Maybe it's just encouragement for us all to hang on in the face of a crumbling society. Aside from providing the opening line to A Christmas Carol, Saint Wenceslaus was a revered 10th century Bohemian leader. He and his steed are memorialized in bronze in the Prague square that bears his name. But Cerny, disgusted by the inability of post-Cold War governments to inspire the nation, in 1909 sculpted a Wenceslaus trying to look heroic while riding an expired mount. The work represents a country in ideological debt because of short-sighted politicians and the resurgence of the Communist Party. In Cerny's perspective, nothing works here, but we all pretend it does. By the turn of the century, Cerny had become one of Europe's leading cultural and political satirists, and one of a handful of Eastern European artists who had achieved global stature. David Cerny's pessimism about politics' influence over art is epitomized in a 2003 work titled Brown Nosers. It asked the viewer to climb a ladder and peer into a derriere, where a video showed impersonators wearing rubber masks of Czech President Václav Klaus and National Gallery director Milan Nizak feeding each other slop to the tune of We Are the Champions. Mr. Cerny is so contemptuous of Mr. Nizak, whom he accuses of fawning on the establishment, that he once refused to enter the National Gallery to accept a prestigious award. It was hate at first sight, he says of Nizak.
Rage. Very often it begins with the rage against some.
Arguably, his most controversial project to date is Entropa, a sculpture commissioned by the Czech Republic to mark the occasion of its presidency of the Council of the European Union.
I was approached by, in that time, the Minister for European affairs, because the Czech Republic is supposed to be a leader or get the leadership of the EU presidency. The EU presidency is changing every half year. In 2008 or 9 probably, we had the presidency, and I was asked by Alexander Vondra, who was in that time the Minister for European Affairs, and he asked me if I would be willing to do an art piece, because they were doing, like, each country during the presidency had some kind of art installation in the Palais Justice in Brussels. It's the biggest building of the European Parliament. And I said that I would do sort of like the frame with the shape of the countries, and then each country would be sort of created by the different artists from all the European countries. And so he really likes that. It's just like fantastic. So Czech Republic is actually making this puzzle out of Europe, putting together different nations, and then I, like designing stuff. So I had like months and a half to actually prepare all the project, and it was difficult because the piece is pretty big. Difficult installation, and while being and preparing the physical possibility how to do it, I came up with the idea to actually fake all the artists.
As a hoax, Cerny and his team created a satirical piece that depicted pointed stereotypes of the EU member nations. Fake artist profiles were also created by Cerny and his collaborators, complete with invented descriptions of their supposed contributions.
But we kept it secret until the moment we even did like fake profiles of all these non-existing artists. So on the unveiling, they actually figure out that there are no European artists who would be making fun of themselves, that it was only this Czech asshole who did it. A lot of the countries felt completely insulted. I have like pile of mails and messages from all the European leaders in that time. So yeah, and that they said that they were, he wanted like because of course I completely fought him, I made a huge fan of him, so he felt like pretty betrayed, and he wanted to really punish me. Even we known each other from before, like a long time before. He was one of the former dissident and nice guys, but he really wanted to punish me, so he wanted at least, to send me to the court for misusing the money. And I told him, oh, that's fantastic. You know what I decided? I just sent to a Czech news agency that I'm sending back the money I get from the government. The money which they gave me as the initial, and it was like 1/10 of the money I spent on the actual making the piece. So I said I'm sending the state money back, and that was it. So that was a pretty big scandal. So in the end, I was like hated by whole Europe, and there are still countries where I actually cannot travel. Still, yeah. Well.
In fact, the international debate brought on by Entropa may prove the most enduring legacy of the Czech presidency, which was deemed a disaster after the Czech government collapsed midway through. Entropa elevated Cerny to the status of folk hero in his native country and spread his already growing reputation worldwide, including to the United States, where he has exhibited in New York, Philadelphia, Chicago, and most recently in Palm Springs, California. One of Cerny's more notable contributions to Prague is Tower Babies, a series of cast figures of crawling infants attached to the Žižkov television tower. The tower, a symbol of the communist era, which stands jarring against the beauty of Prague's skyline. David first sculpted one of the babies in the mid-90s, where it was shown at the Museum of Modern Art in Chicago and other locations in the U.S. The babies express his concern for the dehumanization of society, and he conceived the idea of using the most precious thing to humankind, a baby, and replacing its face with a stamp of a barcode. Fascinating and disturbing at the same time, since the conception of the first bar-coded faced baby, they have multiplied and appeared in installations around the world.
The babies, the show was traveling around states, so it had like 4 or 5 venues. And on the end, I just cut it and disassembled and ship it. And I had the request from the local part of the city where the TV tower stays. And I had the request if I would do something for them, which was 2000. And I said, okay, so let's do this one. Let's, have the babies on the tower. And they really like it. So I spent quite a lot of time, to do all the static engineering and the way how to attach them. So they were attached on the tower for half year or like 2/3 of the year during the summer. And when I took them down, it was a huge, massive protest. That was like shocking. So the local city hall, they were like receiving tons of mails, letters, everything, to keep it on. So this set were on the TV tower for like 20 years, and after 20 years, we had to replace them because of the changing or requirement, whatever the conditions of for the static, from the static engineers. So the problem was with the static. So we had to replace them with the new set, which is like much sturdy and heavier. So those were the original, which were 20 years on the tower. If you look at my work, I would say that the gallery part is really like maybe 1/10 of my production. So I'm enjoying, being a street artist in a way. Yes, it's not. I'm rather having people being faced to things which is unusual for them, and they have to think about it. Rather than, because if you go to the gallery, you expect that you will see an art, obviously. So if I, just throw a bin with garbage here, then because it's in the gallery, you will probably consider that it is an art because it is in the gallery. And it doesn't matter if it's, a piece of dirt or whatever shit. So if you doing something on the street, you probably have to work more precisely to actually do something exceptional. The booster that was done like almost 10 years ago. Well, I was requested by the Czech Olympic team while they had Olympic house, Czech Olympic house in London, and the boss of the Czech Olympic team asked me if I would be willing to do some installation in front of it. So I said, okay, let's try to do something funny. Well, if you look at the push-ups, the most universal thing, you sort of, strengthening your muscles, or top part of the body. So that's why. And it's kind of like, it's sort of like a funny thing because if you look at the drill on army, that's the way you're punished by a push-up. So whatever you're doing, it's like the push-ups, it's like universal kind of, and it's also like a bit stupid movement. So a Kafka piece, it is on the street which is called National Street, Národní National Street, in the center of Prague. And Kafka was perfect example of, the icon of Prague for me. So it was like an irony of the national, or what is, the national street and national and nation as the representative of nation. So for me, he is one of the very few persons who really represent a core of where I live. Besides, of course, I love his books. So it was like, okay, well, it should be probably, if I do something on National Street, it would be probably based on a national heritage. So the national heritage was the Kafka, obviously. And Kafka is, if you walk, in the streets of Prague, you see a zillions, T-shirts with Kafka and Kafka whatever. It's like Kafka, Prague, Kafka. So for me, Kafka is, beside he is fantastic writer and whatever, he's also in a way a bit like, funny figure or symbol, or it's like a Mickey Mouse of Prague in the same time, same way, but not in a bad way, So I picked his face, so that's it. And so it's like the morphing, and again, so we get back into metamorphosis. So it was Kafka, metamorphing. Like, so it is actually resembling the way when you're sculpting a head. If you do, sculpture, you're using a same kind of like a tripod. If you're sculpting a head out of a clay, using that rotating tripod. So this is also one of the things which you can sort of see on that. So it's also about like, shaping something. was approached by in that time actually, the architects of the building, and they said that the owner, the developer of the property wants me to do something which would be based on the piece which I did in Prague, the rotating, spinning Kafka head. So I was thinking about what would be to do something similar, and what would be the actual face if I would pick somebody existing. And then I find out that probably my most favorite person out of the Hollywood area or whatever, because LA for us it's Hollywood, would be David Lynch as my beloved film director. And then I realized that besides he spent a lot of time in Prague because he was doing a lot of music for his movies with the Prague Philharmonic Orchestra. I find out that there is a picture of him, like he holding the face or the photo of Franz Kafka in one interview, saying that if he would be able to choose his brother, it would be Franz Kafka. And also what I find out that if you look at the Twin Peaks, when he acting the agent in the Twin Peaks, in his office, you can see a Franz Kafka picture behind him. It's kind of like funny, yeah, I'm not kidding. So I thought it's perfect. So, he is the person who even have the relationships with the city. So that was, obvious that it will be David Lynch. Well, success is, those are those 10 guys who are 15 guys who have succeed. I'm one of the unknown, Okay, I'm known in Prague, but I'm known in Prague. That's it. So, that's, for me, a success is something else. So of course, in those terms, I succeed. I mean, I can do what I want. I don't have to be employed as the carpenter yet. But who knows?
For more than 30 years, David Cerny has used his art to connect with the greater public, not the world's art establishment. Free-thinking, strong-willed, and eccentric, provocation is the motivation for everything he creates. His work may be an assault on politicians and the elite, or whimsical metaphors of contemporary society. But regardless of whom or what may be his target, it's hard to ignore him. David Cerny's art may entertain, disturb, or both. But all the while, it's shouting to us to wake up and realize what's happening to the world we live in.